let's get more on this. Khaled Elgindy is an adjunct professor at Georgetown University. He's also advised Palestinian leadership in Ramallah on negotiations with Israel in the past. Thank you very much, Khaled, for taking the time to speak to us this evening. We heard, I'm not sure whether you did, President Biden speaking in the last hour and a half or so in his final foreign policy address. And he said, it was happened during my hour, and he said, we are on the brink of a proposal coming to fruition. We're working urgently to close this deal. But the reality is we have been here before. Does this strike you as different this time around, Khaled?
You're right that we have heard this very similar language, that we're on the brink of a breakthrough at any moment before, many times in the past 15 months. I do think the conditions are a little bit different in that this is the very last week of the Biden administration. We have a new Trump administration that is coming back to the White House. Both of them, for their own reasons, would very much like to see a deal before January 20th. And so that is the new factor in all of this. What hasn't changed is the calculations of Prime Minister Netanyahu, who has prolonged the war for as long as possible in order to remain in power. And it's unclear whether his coalition would remain intact if in fact, there is a deal in the coming days.
And we'll talk about President-elect Trump and President Biden in just a moment. But just on the proposal there and the impact this may have, of course, on the political level for Prime Minister Netanyahu. You know, I was looking at the proposal, Khaled, and in terms of looking for what changed in terms of the sticking points here. And to be honest, I didn't see much difference what has been discussed for months now, which is Israeli forces will still maintain a presence along the Philadelphia corridor. Israel will also maintain a buffer zone inside Gaza. The residents of Gaza would be allowed to return freely to the north, but an Israeli official claimed there would be unspecified security arrangements in place. What has shifted? Why now?
Well, a lot has shifted since the proposal was first put out there by President Biden last May. In particular, Hamas is in a much more weakened position than it was then. It's lost its top leadership. It's been militarily degraded significantly in the past 7 months. So that's changed, and of course, the other change is a change in U.S. administration. I think what makes this arrangement slightly different is in terms of exactly what kind of assurances there would be that a hostage deal would result in an end to the war. The Israeli side has resisted any sort of commitment to end the war, despite wanting, of course, the hostages to be released. And so I think it all hinges on what kind of role the United States will play in assuring that a ceasefire does in fact mean a cessation of military activity. That is the part that is still not clear.
Yeah, and we've heard from an Israeli official that Hamas is expected to release 33 hostages, and that is in the first phase of the emerging deal. But we're also hearing, Khaled, according to a source familiar with the ceasefire talks, the quote, I'm quoting him here, only Trump is the incentive, only Trump. So speak of the Trump factor and the dynamic this is having on these negotiations.
Yeah, it's very interesting that a ceasefire deal has eluded the Biden administration, despite pretty significant efforts on their part for the last 7 months. And it does look very much like, the Trump factor is a major factor in the calculations of both Prime Minister Netanyahu and Hamas. Trump is notoriously unpredictable. He does not, of course, he's threatened, all hell will break loose if there isn't a deal, mainly directing that threat at Hamas. But he's not particularly fond of Prime Minister Netanyahu. I think there have been some recent reports about, how little trust he has in him. I think Netanyahu, could always count on President Biden's support, regardless of what the Israeli army did on the ground. And there are some question marks, I think, about Trump. And I think it's clear that he does not want to inherit the mess that the Biden administration has left him in Gaza.
Yeah, look, at least the first, if they get this through the line before January the 20th, of course, then Trump still has to deal with the second phase, right? And big question marks about what that may look like. Khaled Elgindy, appreciate your time and analysis. Thank you, Khaled.